Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Perry with the Circle of Atonement, and I'm here with Circle founder Robert Perry. And today we're talking about what we've learned about forgiveness. Yesterday, Robert and I completed a 28-day forgiveness challenge where we led members of the Circle's Course Companions program through 4 weeks of daily learning and exercises on the teachings and practices of forgiveness in A Course in Miracles. We all gathered together every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern for what was originally supposed to be 15 minutes each day, but pretty soon expanded to 25 to 30 minutes each day because Robert and I realized that it was a bit overly ambitious to think that we could squeeze both teachings and practices into any less than that. But in the end, we had a very dedicated group of about 180 or so who went through the challenge with us each day, and more watched the recordings. We met weekdays, weekends over the month of January, and as I said, we just wrapped yesterday. And so having such a crash course in forgiveness is a really unique experience. A Course in Miracles has literally thousands of themes in this book, and it doesn't tend to linger on any one of them in sequence for too long. So one day you're reading about fear, the next day you're reading about special relationships, then you're reading about God, and on it goes. And so to have such a concentrated time where we could really dive deep into one topic was really transformative for so many of us. And so what Robert and I thought we would do today is to provide an overview of the forgiveness challenge, some highlights related to what we covered and what we learned. And all of the materials and all of the recordings are available in our Course Companions program. So if you're listening or watching this and you want to experience the challenge for yourself, you can register for Course Companions at coursecompanions.com and find all of the 28 recordings, the challenge journal, etc., inside the program under the tab Workshops and Special Events. And so, Robert, just as a bit of background for everyone, the idea for the forgiveness challenge is something that you and I cooked up over a year ago, although it was originally supposed to be a 30-day course. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there are literally thousands of topics that we could have chosen to begin with in a course, but you wanted to start with forgiveness. So let's talk about why that is.
I think it's kind of a logical place to start. The Course does say that forgiveness is the central theme of salvation. Forgiveness is clearly the very heart of A Course in Miracles. If you look at topics in the Course, like you were saying, they kind of come and go, but forgiveness is one that just comes back and back and back all throughout the Course. So it's a great place to start. It's if we're walking the Course's path, we're really meant to be walking a path of forgiveness.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of clearing up to do on this topic. I think students, by and large, tend to know that forgiveness is important, even central to the course's teachings, but are pretty muddy when it comes to specifically what the course has to say about it. And we took some time in the beginning of the challenge to lay out the difference between conventional forgiveness and what the course calls miraculous forgiveness. So let's start with some of those distinctions. How do the course's teachings on forgiveness differ from the conventional view?
Well, in conventional forgiveness, you let the resentment or the anger go as an act of being good, of being a good Christian, maybe, as an altruistic act, or as a way to find your own peace. But you do all of that even though, like, what's real and what's justified is that this person to use the course's vocabulary, sinned, they really are guilty. They really do deserve your anger and your resentment. They even deserve some form of punishment or retaliation. You deserve some form of compensation. So, what reality is telling you in the normal sense, reality as conventionally viewed, is that they deserve your anger. And yet you let it go anyway in order to be good, to be kind, to find peace. And that clash between what you're wanting to do and what's actually justified in reality, quote unquote, is what makes conventional forgiveness so hard to do. And this kind of forgiveness, as we normally understand it, ends up being unloving because it says, I forgive you, but you don't deserve it, right? You deserve my anger, not my love. And it also carries the inevitable implication that I'm the superior one, right? You're the sinner who needs forgiveness. I'm the saint who is forgiving. And these days, you even get the impression a lot that the other person like doesn't matter, right? It's all about you. They don't matter. They don't deserve it, and they're not important. So all of that feels pretty obviously unloving, which is why in the Song of Prayer, the Course calls conventional forgiveness forgiveness to destroy, because there is a subtle destructiveness towards the other in conventional forgiveness. And then, as you mentioned, there's this lovely phrase in the Course just once where it calls its forgiveness miraculous forgiveness. And the whole idea here is that rather than there being a conflict between quote unquote reality and what's deserved and justified, and then you trying to be good, miraculous forgiveness is based on a different view of reality. And in that view of reality, forgiveness is justified. It makes perfect sense. It's an honoring of what's real rather than something that flies in the face of what's real. And that's part of why the Course has so many pages to it. It takes a long time to build up this extremely unconventional view of what's real so that now forgiveness becomes fully justified. And in this view, uh, forgiveness is truly loving, right? It's for the other person. It gives them the message that, as we said in the challenge, no matter what mistakes you have made, your original innocence is still intact. It's a very healing message for anyone to receive. So it is a gift for them. It's a loving gift, but giving it to them is how we forgive ourselves. And just briefly, what I've encountered over the years with course students is they know forgiveness is being used differently. And as they're groping around for what the new meaning is, a lot, if not the majority of students settle on, well, the new meaning is I forgive myself. Or maybe I forgive myself, I forgive the judgments I've put on them. So that in the new view, it's about me. And in the course, it's about them, it's for them. But in the act of forgiving them, that's how we truly forgive ourselves.
That idea that miraculous forgiveness is based on a new view of reality is really everything. And in miraculous forgiveness, what's so striking is that you're looking through what the other person did to the truth of who they are. And so you're not so much looking at them through the perspective of what your physical sight tells you is true, but what your spiritual sight tells you is true about them. Because our physical eyes will say, okay, they really did this thing that hurt me. Their body did this thing. Their personality is abrasive, on and on and on it goes. And what we're doing with miraculous forgiveness is we're just tuning out the physical and tuning in the spiritual. Not to say that the what happens on the level of form isn't important, but it's just that this work is based on seeing through that to something deeper and truer.
Yeah, and that's what makes it, if we really get that, that's what makes forgiveness easier in a course context, and it just makes it more justified. And just to expand on what you said, the basic idea is that what we're fixated on and blaming them for and feeling angry about, you know, their body, what it's done, their misdeeds, their past misdeeds. In the course, all of that is ultimately not real. What is real, which makes forgiveness justified, is that their true identity is as God's holy son, with limitless worth, with untainted innocence and even holiness. And so there, because of what's real, we are justified in overlooking the things that normally cause us anger and resentment and looking past it to their true identity, which really, if seen, only causes us love.
And it's so counter to our experience in these bodies. You know, our physical senses are so heightened. We think that what we see with our eyes, what we hear with our ears, what we touch with our hands, we think this is all that's real. And there's so much more going on here.
Well, the course at one point even says that we made all the stuff our senses see to justify our unforgiveness, because it does every second.
So the forgiveness challenge is 28 days, and it begins with 5 days of theory. And then we choose a main person to forgive in the understanding that we'll also focus on other individuals on various days. And then after the theory, we get more into the extended practice. And each day we cover an aspect of the course's teachings on forgiveness. We spent a lot of time with the workbook's 6 forgiveness lessons. And the workbook obviously has more than 6 forgiveness lessons in it, but there are 6 where we are asked to choose a particular person to forgive, and then we're walked through a process of forgiving them. And that idea of choosing someone to forgive and then going through a structured process of forgiving them is really the basis for the whole challenge. As I said, everyone was asked to pick a main person to forgive at the beginning. And the idea is to see how much you can let those grievances go over the course of a month. And I really loved the analogy that you used at the beginning of the challenge in trying to lift a heavy barbell. Um, if you want to do that, but you don't have the muscle, you hit the gym and you do a lot of reps until you become stronger and can lift the barbell. And the same idea is true with forgiveness. If you are looking at this other person and what they've done just feels impossible to forgive, then the work is to go through the practice periods until your forgiveness muscle becomes stronger and you can lift the forgiveness for that person. So much of course-based practice rests on the accumulation of those reps, those practice periods that we can call reps. So, talk more about the cumulative effect of this practice of forgiveness in the course.
I think that we have kind of collectively lapsed into a state of denial about how much repetition the course wants from us, how much practice it wants from us. We read those workbook lessons, practically every course student does the workbook. And if you read the instructions, he keeps asking for so much repetition, so much practice, so much discipline. And I think we are personally and collectively in denial about that, which is unfortunate because the whole plan is for the reps to add up exactly like they do in physical exercise. And that's what I felt over the course of the 28 days. We talked about the cumulative effect. And what was going on was that, I would do a practice period either in one of our live presentations or in the rest of the day. And I think, yeah, there was a shift there, but it wouldn't be like a humongous shift. Be like, okay, that was something. Too bad I'm not more, further along to the full thing. But then towards the end of the month, bigger shifts started happening. My mind felt more shifted throughout the day. And what it made me realize was that all those practice reps were in fact invisibly adding up. Like I didn't see them adding up. They were just adding up somewhere inside of me. And through that, making possible, the reaching of different places. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work.
That's the real benefit of taking a concentrated period of time and dedicating it to this work. I know I've had a long span of time with certain people I've been trying to forgive where I'm going through the text or going through the workbook. And then one day I'm like, I feel different about this. My mind, the real estate in my mind that was taken up with all this spinning on what they did isn't as intense. And what I realized through the challenge is that the more reps you do in a shorter period of time, you can actually speed up that process. And I know that might not be true for everyone, but there were a lot of real shifts that happened amongst participants of the challenge in a short, 4 weeks.
Yeah, which was great to see, and we'll say more about that. But I think we're all kind of counting on one big blowout experience. Uh, but it really is the accumulation of lots and lots of little ones. And when you have that big blowout one, oftentimes it just fades and goes away because it's not supported by all the little reps.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be entirely too much to go through all 28 days of the challenge here, but let's talk about some of the big themes. There's not one forgiveness practice in the course. There's one main idea, and that's looking beyond error to the unconditional holiness of God and other people. But there are many, many different ways to get there. And the course has hundreds of different forgiveness practices, and it was really hard to choose which ones to focus on.
It was, and there's even a workbook lesson where it acts like all of the lessons in the workbook, even ones that don't mention forgiveness or look like forgiveness exercises, really are a form of forgiveness. So there's a ton in the course. And, we had to go through a process of deciding what to include and what to leave on the cutting room floor. But we narrowed it down to, we had about 20 days where we covered an aspect of forgiveness on a teaching level, and then we had an exercise in applying that aspect. And there were things like looking beyond error. That was our first practice day. And the idea there is that from the course's standpoint, the other person's errors aren't really real. They are errors, and they do have, hurtful intent. The course does not sugarcoat that part of it, but they're not actually real. We go through a process through looking for them, dwelling on them, analyzing the motives behind them. We go through an active mental process of making the errors real and turning them into what we emotionally treat as sins. So that was one day. We had another day on how sin is really just a mistake, an error. We talked about the different characteristics of each of those. We had a day where we talked about attack as a call for love or a call for help. We had a day about looking for their loving thoughts. Anyway, it kind of went on and on. And it would get fully tedious to go through it all right now. But what I think is important about the variety is that our mind needs that. If you go online, there are some really thought through and well researched approaches to forgiveness that have come out of the psychological science of forgiveness. And it's generally like these 5 steps, or maybe these 10 steps. And the course does not have one process, like you're saying. It has many, 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 many processes. And the analogy I always like to use is if you can imagine forgiveness being one big circular room, and let's say it has 100 doors on the perimeter of the room. And over one door is titled, remember only the loving thoughts. Over another door is titled, they are not their body. Over another door is titled, who they really are is the Son of God. over another door is titled "You Cannot Be Hurt," and et cetera, et cetera. And there would be ultimately be hundreds in the course, but let's just say 100. The notion is that those are different doorways into the same room, but we need the different doorways. We saw in the challenge that for some people, their mind was like, today left me cold. And then the next day they might be, this was the one for me. And the doorways, they go all the way from really terrestrial things, like they're just making a mistake, to really celestial things, like who they are as an eternal being beyond this world. And so there's just, in my mind, a tremendous beauty in that range of different themes and the range of different processes, because our minds need that. One simple thing is not going to do it.
It is really interesting that there is work that has been done on the topic of forgiveness, good work that's been done on this topic. The more we're talking about this idea, the better. And yet, you're not really hearing much about forgiving the other person first, healing them, and that is what in turn heals you. That feels very unique to the course. And so, what I love about this whole process is that you're always, again, trying to do the same thing. You're trying to look past their error to the truth of who they are. The course gives you so many different ways to do it. But in the end, it's all unique to the course because not only are those 200 doors to the room unique, but the central idea is unique.
Yeah, I would say it this way. First of all, the forgiveness processes that have come out of the forgiveness research, they are focused on forgiving others. Okay. Um, they aren't focused on finding forgiveness of oneself through forgiving others. They're focused on finding peace, freedom from that poison of anger and resentment through forgiving others. The big difference is they all assume our conventional view of reality. They aren't saying before you can do this practice, let's show you a whole other way of looking at what's real, at the reality of the other person, at the reality or unreality of what happened. They are starting with the conventional view of reality. Unfortunately, in that conventional view, as some of these processes will fully admit, forgiveness is not justified. So you're having to almost muscularly, through gritted teeth, do a letting go that is not deserved or justified. And that puts your mind in conflict with itself, right? Part of your mind's like, hey, but this is what's real. The other part of your mind is like, but I need to find peace. And you're in this tug of war. So, I think the genius of the course's approach is it realizes, based on our conventional view of what's real, forgiveness doesn't really make sense. Love doesn't really make sense. We have to conjure an entire alternate view of what is real to provide a genuine foundation, a solid base for the act of forgiving so that our mind isn't in that tug of war.
Yeah, and throughout the challenge, we talked about the what is forgiveness section in the workbook, where it says essentially, we think it's hard to forgive because we're trying to overlook something that's quote unquote real, something that really happened, and see to the truth of the other person. But that section says actually, what's hard is holding on to the grievance and what it does in our own mind. And I think anyone who has really struggled with forgiveness can appreciate the truth in that idea, because when you have someone that you haven't forgiven, it eats, oh, it's acidic in your brain. It eats away at you all the time. And the course says, you think forgiving's hard? That's what's hard. What's hard is what unforgiveness does to your mind.
Yeah, I think you're talking about that discussion in lesson 121, which is about the unforgiving mind. There's like 4 paragraphs about the unforgiving mind, maybe even 5. And we took people through, sentence by sentence and said, does this resemble your mind? And there was a pretty resounding like, well, a great deal of it resembles my mind. which means the cost of having an unforgiving mind is gargantuan. And then there's another lesson that talks about how forgiveness looks from the point of view of our conventional view of reality. And how it looks is like denial. And he even uses that word. He says, thus is forgiveness really but a sin like all the rest. It asks you to look on something that is clearly, evil, sinful, whatever, and act like it's as blameless as the grass. So there is a tremendous power, A, in looking at the cost of our unforgiveness, and B, in being able to switch over to a view of reality in which forgiveness is not denial. It's not a lie. It's not its own kind of sin.
Yeah. Um, I was talking about what is forgiveness, but the lesson that you're referring to, lesson 121, forgiveness is the key to happiness, has those paragraphs that talk about the unforgiving mind. And I know this is not exactly completely on topic, but it's just so interesting to see that this is what unforgiveness does to our mind. It says the unforgiving mind is full of fear. It is sad without the hope of respite and release from pain, suffers and abides in misery, peers about in darkness, seeing not, yet certain danger is lurking there. I mean, the idea that this is what's hard makes a lot of sense. The unforgiving mind is hard. So that actually brings me to the next question, which is in the challenge, we asked participants to focus on their most meaningful shifts. We called these the greatest hits. And we didn't talk about some of ours. You've shared some things that have struck you from the challenge already, but what were some of your greatest hits from this challenge?
Some of them, I'll just list a few of them because every day seemed to bring its own like new twist. But day 9 was the past is over, it can touch me not. And I really connected with a line that we adapted from chapter 5 in the text. And the line was, your soul has no history, being the same yesterday, today, and always. And to say that to somebody, your soul has no history. And I really love that idea of the course's idea, which we presented in a recent podcast, of being in the present. Like being in the present isn't being wonderfully in touch with the full, feast for your senses that the present holds. Being in the present means seeing this other person without their past as having a reality that has no past. So that really got me.
That's a good
And
one. That's a really, really good one. That one got me too. And I just want to reiterate what you're saying because I think it was meaningful for many of the participants of the challenge. Because having taught mindfulness for so many years, being in the present means being fully aware of what's happening in physical form in this moment so much of the time. You're taking in the wind, you're taking in the sand beneath your toes, you're taking in like all kinds of things in form. And what the course is saying is that being in the present means that you're seeing the truth of
yeah,
what's real. And that's a
well,
beautiful distinction.
and specifically seeing your brother or sister without their past, without all their past misdeeds, and they've all got them, unfortunately. Um, that is to me, a dramatically different concept of what it means to be in the present. So that line is what grabbed me. Your soul has no history. That I was just saying that all day after that morning part of the challenge. Another one, day 15 was remember only the loving thoughts. And the notion that I could look back in the past and remember only their loving thoughts. The rest is unreal, but somehow their loving thoughts are forever. And the idea that I could look back into my past with certain people or certain groups and just see the love that was there, because there was love there. That was a biggie, and that was really stayed with me. Another one, day 22, was about lesson 68, love holds no grievances. And the connection in that lesson between seeing everyone as my friend and as part of me, and then if I can see that, I will experience myself as living in a world that's safe. Like that connection, when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. But who's ever talked about that? Seeing everyone as your friend and thereby living in a world that's safe, because friends are safe, right? So one of the lines that I've been using a lot is I would see you as my friend, that I may remember you are part of me and come to know myself, which is from Lesson 68. And then I think my final really big one was there is nothing to forgive. And so we did on day 24, 25, we did There's Nothing to Forgive, which was kind of the philosophical apex of the course's teaching, right? We forgive the Son of God for what he did not do. The course says 4 different times there is quote unquote nothing to forgive, but we made the exercise like a recap of all the previous exercises, like because only the loving thoughts are real, there is nothing to forgive. Because their sin was merely a mistake, there is nothing to forgive. And that was a really big one. That was a really emotional one for me. And so now I've been using that line like crazy all through the day. I haven't been saying much about it, but I've been really leaning on it, and it just goes right in. So those are just some of mine.
Isn't it wild how you can study the course for 40 years intensely as you have, and still these ideas hit you as new all the time? Speaks
Oh yeah,
to what a cornucopia we have here of beauty.
yeah. I mean, I think we've said in different places that humanity could take centuries diving into this ocean and not exhausting it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about some of my greatest hits from the challenge, just things that I want to hold on to and remember personally. And I love the course's teaching that we don't have to take in someone's unloving perception of us or someone's even flippant, snarky, unloving comment and use that to send them a message of blame. And we are really good at that. Instead of just letting something go, letting it slide off our back, we'll let the unloving perception in and then use our hurt to send a message to them of look at what you've done to me, which is designed to make them feel guilty and uh, we can manipulate their behavior from their guilt. So instead, we have the capacity to not let that in, to not let those unloving perceptions in, and just send them a message of love instead, to say, I can't be hurt because I'm a son of God. And I love the strength in that idea. That's a biggie for me. Um, One thing that really struck me also from this challenge is the idea that no matter what, we can forgive because we can lean on God's forgiveness when ours isn't sufficient. And that idea, for some reason, just really struck me during the challenge. It's like, because we do have these gaps, right, where we feel like our forgiveness falls short, and it's amazing to think that we can lean on His love to fill in those gaps and get all the way over to forgiveness. I really connect with the idea that when the other person won't forgive us, that we can rest assured that in their true nature, they are forgiving us. They are extending a hand of healing to us. And in our true nature, we're grateful for that. They're grateful for our efforts to forgive. And God is grateful for all of our efforts to forgive. And if you can keep that in mind, then what it means is that there's never a reason to not try and extend forgiveness to someone else. You don't have to say, well, they're never going to forgive me, so why bother? You can always extend forgiveness, even if it's just in your own mind, knowing that the deeper, truer part of them is always grateful for that gift. God's grateful for that gift, and the truest part of you is grateful for it as well. So I love I love the idea that even if the relationship looks like scorched earth in form, that at the truest level, it's already healed and it's okay. So those are beautiful things to keep in mind related to forgiveness.
Just as an aside, one of the days we did on what if they don't forgive us? And that wasn't one of our exercise days. It was just one of our kind of, we call them rest days, where we cover some topic that's related to the forgiveness process, but isn't actually a forgiveness exercise. And that was one of the days that I think grabbed people the most, because the course has several places where it deals with that topic. There's a couple places that, what if they don't return your forgiveness? Um, and then there's another place where, what if they don't receive your gift of healing, but it's close enough to a gift of forgiveness to make it applicable. And people really got into those, because the fact is the course knows full well that we will use their anticipated unforgiveness of us as an excuse to not forgive ourselves, to not do our part. Um, and it just has such great ways to see that whole thing that we would never come up with on our own. There's this
Mhm.
whole, without going into it, there was this whole issue about how it starts with space and gets projected as time. And that sounds totally unrelated to forgiveness, but it's so related, and people really connected with it.
Yeah. Well, we should probably unpack that just briefly so that it doesn't sound impractical.
It's a bit delicate. So it's in chapter 26, and it's the section called the immediacy of salvation. I believe it's section 8. Um, and the idea is, there's some kind of rift with somebody. So there's unforgiveness on both sides. Okay. Maybe we're being cold to each other, or not speaking, or whatever. And in our mind, we're thinking, if I forgive them, then it's going to be a long time. I'll have to wait. After I put myself out there, I'm going to have to wait while they still give me the cold shoulder. They won't return my forgiveness. We won't reconcile. And now I'll have put myself out there. Like, how uncomfortable is that? And we know that situation, I think. But what Jesus says in the Course is that here's what's really going on. What's really going on is rooted in space, which he says is the primary illusion. Space, not time. So the space is, I don't actually want to join with them, to reconcile with them. I really want some space. I want some distance. I want some separation. Okay. I don't want us to forgive and join now. So then I'm going to take the space that I want and project that onto them. And now I see them as needing time before they're willing to accept my gift, return it so that we can join. Okay. And then the time that I anticipate they're going to take becomes my excuse to not forgive, but my unforgiveness really comes out of my own desire to be separate from them, my desire for space.
I'm glad that you unpacked that. That is a bit delicate, but I think what we can all relate to is that section or that part of the course that talks about this idea says that joining is our dread. And I that's a really interesting idea, because oftentimes we'll say, you know what, I really do want to forgive this person. And then you realize, wait a second, I actually don't. And then we come up with all these flowery ways to justify it in our mind, like we need space, or they're not going to forgive me, so why even bother putting myself out there? But at the end of the day, it's really just about our unwillingness to forgive. And that's where the practicality comes in, because who can't relate to that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your personal experience in the challenge. So this isn't something that you or I really shared much of in the recordings, but we certainly talked a lot about it amongst ourselves. Robert and I, it's January, or it was January when we did the challenge, so it was too cold to walk. We love to walk, so we became mall walkers and found a local mall. And every night we would go into countless loops talking about the forgiveness challenge, both what we were going to say the next day and also what was really landing for us and what we'd shared so far. So just, I'm sure there are folks who are curious about what was the experience like for you? Because you selected someone and took yourself through the challenge as well.
Yeah, well, there was both this experience personally and the experience professionally, which I want to get to in a bit. And the experience professionally was every bit as impactful as the experience personally. Personally, what I will say is that I felt like, in the most general sense, it was like a light was going on in my mind over the course of the month and just kind of gathering um, and brightening. So I ended the month and have come away from it truly feeling different towards everyone. I feel like I've been giving way too much of a home for my entire life to unforgiveness in my mind. Subtle forms, that just seem to hum along of their own accord. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I could really see everyone differently. And my mind is not wanting to go to those habitual thought processes that I haven't really even taken notice of. Something in me says, just don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. So there's that general thing. But I came away with a more specific sense in regard to, and for me, it was I picked people rather than one person. I sort of had a main person, but it ended up being a lot of people that were sort of, all grouped in my mind. Um, and the feeling I came away with was it really is fine to just let the past go. Bless everyone from the past. Hold on to the love that was exchanged because there's always love there. So hold on to that love, value it, and walk forward into a new future that doesn't really reference the past, in which I consider everyone as my friend, which was one of the ideas that really got to me. I would see you as my friend, that I may remember you are part of me. Um, so I'm kind of carrying that general picture that very much has to do with past, present, and future.
In the final day, the what now day, one of the things that you said was that we really have to take care to guard our mind so that all of those old grievances don't just come rushing back in because we're not doing the practice as vigorously as we did while we were doing the challenge. And one thing that you just said it, but one thing that I really appreciate about your experience in the challenge is that whereas some of those judgments could come in and just kind of take root, and the next thing you know, you're feeling a certain way and you're saying judgmental things, we have more capacity and power than we realize to observe those thoughts and say, no, I don't want to go there, than we give ourselves credit for. And if we could just be more of the observer and say, oh, there's that judgmental thought again, I don't want to do that anymore, and kind of whack a mole it in our mind, then I think that process will get easier and easier and easier over time. And what you realize is, oh, I have changed. I am more loving and less judgmental and more in line with who the course is asking me to be
You
and who
know,
we want to be.
yeah, and I want to get to what your experience was, but just one last thing on mine. As you're talking, I'm realizing that my main experience was about getting away more from the unforgiving mind and into moving into the forgiving mind. It was about the particular people, but it was also about the transition in what kind of mind I have. And my mind right now, I'm really planning to hang on to it, and I'm going to be reviewing all the practices on a regular basis. Right now, it's just a more forgiving mind. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like a better, brighter place.
My experience was that I had a particular person that I was trying to forgive who had been kind of grinding in my mind for many, many years. And I've tried various practices to forgive this person over the years. Sometimes when those hurts are really, really deep, it's hard and it's painful. Um, so I've had some success in forgiving this person, but not a ton. And what happened to me around the middle of the challenge is that I had a dream. And I'm not someone who regularly has dreams that I feel impart some kind of significant message, but this one did. And in the dream, the person I was trying to forgive, I show up at their house and they open the door. I walk in, there's just kindness in their eyes, and we both turned around and they put their arm around my back. And and it was a simple gesture, but I knew without the person even saying anything that it was an extension of forgiveness and an offer of healing. And so I woke up and I was telling you about this. I've never had a dream about this person in my entire life. And I was telling you about it, and we were like, gosh, that feels like there's something there. Like maybe, as I was saying before, on that um, true mind, subconscious level, there is an extension from this other person to me and me to them. And then what was also interesting is that a few days later in the exercise, we were asked to ask for guidance about what we needed to know about forgiveness at that point. And this was, again, a few days after the dream. But what I got in that guidance was take that dream seriously. And I think sometimes when true guidance comes, when we have dreams or when we have a download or something like that, that is real, it doesn't leave us. It hits us in a really big way and kind of that becomes a new place and we go from that place, right? That becomes the new ground zero for us. And so I was so moved by the dream and how I felt as a result of it that I actually moved on to another person in the challenge. And it was big because this person that I came into the challenge with, I'd spent again years and years and years trying to forgive. And then, I don't know if it's the cumulative effect of all the work or just the focus or some combination of both or divine help. I don't know what happened, but I feel completely different in relation to my main person that I came into the challenge with.
That's not a small thing.
No, it's not a small thing. So there is something remarkable about going through an experience like this together as a group, but also it's not all breakthroughs. And there was some resistance to these ideas, which is completely normal. We saw some resistance to the courses teaching that there's no such thing as sin, there's just mistakes. People just made a mistake, made an error. That's really hard for people, especially when you've really been hurt by someone else's behavior. Uh, you were talking earlier about how moved you were about seeing everyone as friend, and it's hard for people to do that. And then there's also the idea of unconditional forgiveness, and people really struggle with that, where the idea of forgiveness seems really beautiful up until you get to this one horrific thing, and then it stops. And so talk a little bit about I know we've got to wrap, but talk a little bit about the resistance that came up and actually more specifically, if someone's feeling resistance to these ideas, how can they get themselves to the other side?
Yeah, I think that the resistance, it was kind of more of the resistance that you want, where someone's not trying to negate what you're bringing. They're trying to work out kinks in their mind so they can take on board what you're bringing. And in the case with the sin versus the mistakes, part of the what came back to us, we'd already dealt with in the presentation, and I just guess people hadn't really caught it or taken it in. They were saying this is not a mistake, this was intentional. And we were like, well, that's what we said in the presentation. The course is not saying that it was unintentional. I think that's a popular understanding among course students that, well, it's a call for love. That means I was just trying to get love. Sorry, I just did it in the wrong way. The course is saying, no, every attack has intent. No one attacks without intent to hurt. And that's a quote from lesson 170. Course is not pie in the sky about the fact that our intentions are destructive. and hurtful. We want to hurt. We take pleasure. We think we gain from hurting. So, we could just, in some cases, clarify, hey, we tried to take care of this already. Let's just say it again here. Um, I think that what I appreciated about, the resistance to the pushback was that, it was honest. It was like, hey, I'm trying to get my way through this. Other resistance I felt was, I think, completely unconscious. And that was where everyone's been so schooled in it's about you, it's about you, it's a gift to you, it's a gift to you, it's about you, it's not about them, that just was leaking in, from various people over the time, because we've just been marinating in that in the spiritual realm for God knows how long. But when people brought that up, you or I would say, hey, this is where the course is coming from here. And everybody seemed to be like, oh, okay, like seemed to
Mhm.
just go with it, which I really appreciated.
It is two different versions of resistance that you face, that we face here in sharing these ideas. One is the angry resistance, the hold on, this person did this thing, and don't you tell me that it didn't happen. And I've shared many times, I've even lost friends over the teaching that unconditional forgiveness means unconditional forgiveness. Um, so that's one form of it. But what we saw amongst the participants in the challenge was this second form of, okay, like trying to take on board that this is a really beautiful idea, that if the course is teaching it, that there's some higher wisdom there, and trying to stretch to the wisdom versus trying to pull the wisdom down to the basest of human instinct. And to me, that's the work, is saying, okay, we know that an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, as Marianne Williamson said recently, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world dead. So we know that if we continue to attack for attack, that we're just going to have a world that perpetuates the same old hate. We know that forgiveness is a healing balm that is needed for the world. And so the idea is to stretch ourselves to it again versus pulling it down to us. And so in the form of the resistance that we got, there was a lot of like, okay, I'm having trouble, but I'm gonna stretch and try and get there too. And that's a beautiful thing. We don't take
Hmm.
that for granted because that has not always been the case here at the circle. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's
we've got a
true.
lot of angry yeah buts around these ideas.
And we've had a lot of people in the past who had really soaked in other interpretations of the course. And maybe they knew their chapter and verse pretty well. And I would get a lot of pushback over the years from people like that. And if someone has been steeped in another interpretation of the course, they kind of stay there. Um, so we've got a crowd that's pretty flexible and willing to
Yeah.
go with us. We'll show them our support in the course, and I think they trust us. I do, before we go, I do want to read one of the experiences that was reported on the site. Every day, or we don't have time for this? Is that what I'm seeing on your face?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
I mean, we
okay,
don't, but go ahead.
we don't. Okay, I thought I saw that. Every day we would see the most beautiful sharing about breakthroughs people had had during the exercises, and we could just collect a ton of those. Um, but this is one that happened on our last exercise day, so it's fresh in my mind. Just want to go ahead and read it, as not just the one shining example, but as an example of what we were just seeing all the time, which was amazing for us to see. Okay, so one of our participants said this after the exercise on the last exercise day, day 27. My heart overflows with joy and gratitude. I did the exercise in the quiet of the early morning and had time to process it afterwards. It is an extremely powerful tool, that particular exercise. Very concise and very effective. I felt the guidance of spirit all throughout the process. My person, we had our main person each, was there again and I saw him in all his glory, a being of pure light. The most astonishing thing was that in the beginning of the exercise, I really did see his mistakes, flaws, and sins, even. All the old emotions of hurt and feelings of abandonment and betrayal were there again, because the exercise directs you to get in touch with all that. Then, upon being guided deeper into the experience of altering my view of him, everything changed. The Christ appeared in his full glory, a bright, all enveloping light. There was such relief in beholding his true identity. The shift was enormous. Afterwards, I could truly sense how the burden of my own pain and guilt was lifted from me. How innocent we both really are. There was no felt difference between us any longer. Now, God, doesn't everybody want that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't we all just be so happy to have that kind of shift?
Julie said, "I'm forever changed." That's the one that's stuck in my mind. It's like, wow, we really these practices and this teaching is so powerful. You can be forever changed in a matter of weeks. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and then if I recall, she also said, "I can't unsee miraculous forgiveness now," which I
Hmm.
thought was a great way to put it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really well said. Okay, so just to end this, give me 30 seconds of what's the big takeaway for you? What do you want to just make sure you hold on to from the challenge?
Well, I think the big takeaway in a nutshell for me is this really works. The Course isn't saying lofty things about forgiveness. It has complete, detailed teaching, and it has extensive, detailed practice instructions. It's a complete system. And that combined with how effective those teachings and practices are means that we really can make this the center of our lives. We can use this to heal our relationships. I don't think anything else is going to heal our relationships. We can use this as the center of our internal journey to God. And we can use this as the heart of our function, our life purpose, our calling in the world. Forgiveness really can become, as the Course says in one of its lessons, our simple formula and the way we live, our way of life. Uh, so I'm ending this thinking this really this can be it for us. And
Hmm.
that's why I'm going to, and started this morning, going to be reviewing the teachings and practices a little bit each day.
I love that idea that forgiveness is not the one rung at the bottom of the spiritual ladder that we climb on our search for true spiritual development. I love the idea that forgiveness is the ladder itself. And the Course says that this is our way to God. There is no other way. That's an incredible statement. There is no other way. This is how we get home. And so, with that, we will close. If you did not get to join us live for the forgiveness challenge and you want to take a deep dive yourself into what the Course teaches on forgiveness, again, all the materials are recorded and they're available to you within our Course Companions program. You can register for Course Companions at coursecompanions.com and you'll find all 28 recordings with the challenge journal inside the program under the tab workshops and special events. Thank you so much for watching or listening to Exploring A Course in Miracles. And on behalf of Robert and I and everyone at the Circle, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.